Portland, Oregon, a Tuesday in late October when the rain had not yet decided whether to stay or go, and the sky hung low and gray, like a sheet someone had forgotten to pull back. The kind of afternoon that makes the warmth of any indoor place feel earned, feel necessary, feel like a small mercy the world was granting you without being asked. The Maple Court Food Hall sat on the ground floor of a converted warehouse on SE Division Street. It was not the kind of place that appeared on glossy food magazines or on the Instagram feeds of influencers chasing the next aesthetic backdrop. It was the kind of place that belonged to the neighborhood the way a worn-in pair of boots belongs to a closet. Imperfect, reliable, unmistakably there. 12 vendors, mismatched tables, string lights that someone had wound too tightly around exposed beams years ago, and no one had ever bothered to fix. The smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread and coffee that had been brewing since 6 a.m. drifted through the space like a quiet invitation. Maya Chen arrived at 12:47 on a Tuesday, the way she arrived at 12:47 on every Tuesday, because Tuesdays were the one day of the week she did not have to be anywhere else. She was 31. She had a 6-year-old daughter named Lily, who had her father's dark eyes and Maya's stubbornness, and she had a job at a small nonprofit that paid just enough to keep the apartment on SE 34th Street, just enough to keep Lily in the after-school program that ended at 12:30, and not nearly enough to ever feel like breathing was easy. But Tuesdays were hers. Tuesdays were the hour between picking up Lily and needing to be anywhere, and Maya spent that hour at the Maple Court Food Hall with a bowl of mac and cheese from the vendor called Comfort, and a glass of the house white from the bar at the back. Lily came with her, always. The girl sat beside her mother with a coloring book and a set of crayons that was missing the blue and the orange, and she colored with a focus that made her look older than 6, her small hand moving in careful lines that sometimes stayed inside the borders and sometimes did not, and Maya never said a word about the ones that did not. On this particular Tuesday, they arrived to find every table taken. The hall was fuller than usual, maybe because of the rain, maybe because someone had posted about the new pumpkin soup vendor on a local blog, maybe for no reason at all. Maya stood near the entrance with the tray in both hands, 2 bowls of mac and cheese, 2 glasses of apple cider, 1 small cookie she had bought because Lily would ask for one, and it was easier to have it all ready. And she scanned the room the way someone scans a parking lot for an open space, methodically, without panic, with the quiet resignation of someone who had learned long ago that the world did not always arrange itself for her convenience. And then she saw the corner. It was a small table, tucked against the far wall near a window that looked out onto the wet sidewalk. A 2-top, the kind of table that was meant for 1 or 2 at most. 1 chair was occupied, the other was empty. The woman in the occupied chair had short dark hair, cut close on the sides and longer on top in a way that looked deliberate but effortless, the way some people manage to make everything look. She was wearing a gray Henley with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows and jeans that had been rolled at the cuffs, and below the rolled cuffs of the left leg, where a second shoe should have been, there was a prosthetic leg, not hidden, not disguised, present, visible, resting on the tile floor with the same casual permanence as everything else about her. She was reading a paperback novel, 1 hand wrapped around a ceramic mug of something steaming, and she looked the way people look when they have found exactly the place they wanted to be and have no intention of leaving it anytime soon. There was a stillness to her that was not boredom. It was peace, the kind of peace that is hard-won and quietly held. Maya stood for maybe 10 seconds, calculating. The table was for 2. 1 chair was free. Asking to share felt intrusive. Felt like walking into someone's living room and sitting down on their couch without being invited. The woman looked comfortable. She looked settled. She looked like someone who had chosen solitude the way you choose a favorite coat, deliberately, because it fit. Lily tugged on the sleeve of Maya's jacket. "Mom, I'm hungry." Maya looked down at her daughter, looked at the tray, looked back at the hall, at the tables that were all occupied, at the corner where the woman sat with her book and her coffee and her empty chair. She took a breath, not a deep one, just enough, and walked over. "Hi," she said, and her voice came out quieter than she expected, the way it always did in moments when she was asking for something. "I'm sorry. I know this is a little awkward, but every other table is taken. Would you mind if we shared? It's just us." The woman looked up from her book, and what Maya noticed first, before the eyes, which were a dark, warm brown, before the slight smile, before anything else, was that she did not look surprised. She looked like she had seen Maya standing there, calculating for those 10 seconds, and had been waiting for her to make a decision. "Of course," the woman said. And then, with a smile that was small but entirely genuine, the kind of smile that does not perform but simply is, "Honestly, the table's been lonely." Maya set the tray down, sat, lifted Lily onto the chair between her and the woman, and the girl looked up at the stranger with the frank, unguarded assessment that 6-year-olds perform without embarrassment. A quick scan from head to toe, a brief pause at the prosthetic leg, and then back up to the face, where she apparently found whatever she was looking for. "What's your name?" Lily asked, because at 6 there was no reason to wait. "Eleanor," said the woman, "but most people call me Ellie. I'm Lily. That's my mom. She always looks worried." Ellie laughed. It was a real laugh. Short, warm, surprised out of her. The kind of laugh that happens when someone catches you off guard with something you didn't see coming. Maya felt her face go hot and opened her mouth to apologize. But Ellie held up a hand. "Don't," she said. "That was the best introduction I've gotten in years." Maya smiled despite herself. And for a moment, just a moment, the weight she carried everywhere, the constant low hum of worry that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat, went quiet. They ate. Lily colored. Ellie read, or pretended to read. Maya noticed, in the way you notice things you're not supposed to be watching, that Ellie's eyes stayed on the same page for a long time, and that they drifted, more than once, to Lily's coloring book, to the careful lines and the places where the crayon went outside the border, with an expression that was not pity and not amusement, but something closer to recognition. At some point, Maya didn't mark exactly when, Ellie closed the book and set it on the table, spine up, and said, "She's a good kid." It was not said with the hollow enthusiasm that strangers sometimes used when they commented on other people's children, the performative brightness that meant nothing. It was said simply, observationally, the way someone states a fact they find worth stating. Maya looked at Lily, who was now attempting to draw a horse inside the margin of the coloring book. The horse looking more like a lopsided cloud with legs. "She is," Maya said. And then, without planning it, without knowing why she said it, "She's the best thing I ever did." Ellie looked at her. Really looked. Not the polite glance of an acquaintance, but the kind of look that sees something. And nodded once, quietly, as if Maya had said something that mattered. They stayed for another 20 minutes. Lily finished her cookie and asked if she could have another one. Maya said no, and Lily accepted this with the dignity of someone who had already known the answer. When it was time to go, Lily needed to be back for the after-school pickup window, and the rain was picking up outside. Maya stood and gathered the tray and felt, for the first time in a long time, that she had spent an hour somewhere without spending it alone. "Thank you," she said, "for letting us sit here." Ellie smiled. That same small, unhurried smile. "Thank you for asking." Maya walked out with Lily's hand in hers, and the rain falling on them before they reached the door, and she didn't think about Ellie again until that night, when Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, and Maya was standing in the kitchen with a glass of water, and she realized she was thinking about the way Ellie held her coffee mug, both hands wrapped around it, close to her chest, like it was something worth holding onto. Ellie had been coming to the Maple Court Food Hall on Tuesdays for 11 months. She had found it during what she privately called the reconstruction, not of her leg, which had been reconstructed surgically 18 months before that, but of her life, which had been reconstructed piece by piece, vendor by vendor, Tuesday by Tuesday, in the slow and unglamorous way that lives are rebuilt after they have been taken apart. The accident had been 2.5 years ago. A cyclist, not her, had run a red light at an intersection in the southeast Portland neighborhood where she lived. Ellie had been in the crosswalk. The impact had shattered her left leg below the knee. The surgery took 7 hours. The recovery took longer than anyone told her it would, which is the way recovery always works. And the grief, because there was grief, real grief, for the body she had lived in before, took longer still. She had been married when it happened. Her wife, Sarah, had stayed for 4 months after the accident. had been there for the surgery, for the first weeks of rehabilitation, for the nights when Ellie couldn't sleep, because the phantom pain made it feel like her leg was still there and still broken. And then Sarah had left, not cruelly, not with a fight, but with the quiet devastation of someone who had looked at the person she loved and realized she did not know how to love the version of that person that existed now. It was not the worst thing anyone had ever done. It was one of the worst things that had ever been done to Ellie. The food hall had become a place where none of that mattered. A place where she was simply a woman with a book and a coffee, sitting at a table by the window, watching the rain. No one knew her story. No one looked at her leg with pity, or with the careful avoidance that was its own form of pity. She was just there, present, existing in a space that asked nothing of her except that she occupy it. When the woman with the tray had stood in the middle of the hall looking lost, Ellie had watched her for a few seconds before the woman noticed the corner table, had watched the way she held the tray, steady, practiced, like someone who had been carrying things for other people for a long time, had watched the little girl with the coloring book tug on her sleeve, and something in Ellie had gone very still and very quiet, the way it does when you recognize something in someone else that you have only ever seen in yourself. She said yes without hesitation. And when the little girl said the thing about her mother always looking worried, Ellie laughed because it was true. She could see it, the worry, sitting in the set of Maya's shoulders, in the way her eyes moved around the room, like she was always checking for exits. And because it was said so honestly, so without filter, that it felt like a gift. When they left, Ellie sat at the corner table for another half hour. The book stayed closed. She held her coffee and watched the rain streak down the window and thought about the way Maya had said, "She's the best thing I ever did." Not with pride exactly, though there was pride in it. With something quieter, with something that sounded like the reason someone keeps going. Have you ever felt a love this strong? If this story is touching your heart, follow along. Tell us where you're listening from and what you're feeling right now. The following Tuesday, Maya arrived at 12:47 again. She didn't think about it, or rather, she thought about it the way you think about brushing your teeth. Automatically, without interrogating the impulse. It was Tuesday. This was what she did on Tuesdays. But when she stepped into the food hall with Lily and the tray, and the familiar smell of garlic and coffee wrapped around them like something warm, her eyes went to the corner first. Before the vendors, before the bar, before scanning for open tables the way she usually did. They went straight to the corner, and the corner was there, and Ellie was there, in the same chair, with another book, or maybe the same one, Maya couldn't tell from across the room, and another mug of coffee steaming in the gray light from the window. Maya didn't hesitate this time, didn't stand in the middle of the hall calculating. She walked across the room with Lily's hand in hers, and the tray balanced in the other, and stopped at the corner table and said, "Is the table still lonely?" Ellie looked up, and there it was again, that smile, small and warm and not performed. And she moved her book to one side of the table to make room. "It has been," she said. "Actually." Lily recognized Ellie immediately and sat down with none of the hesitation that adults carry into new social situations. Children do not have the luxury of pretending they don't remember. They remember everything, and they say so. "Ellie," she said, with the bright, uncomplicated pleasure of someone who is genuinely glad to see a person. "I drew you something." She pulled a folded piece of paper from the pocket of her jacket. She had been carrying it, Maya realized, since before they walked in, as if she had planned this, as if she had known they would be coming back, and unfolded it on the table. It was a drawing, done in crayon on notebook paper, of two women sitting at a table. One had dark hair and a worried expression that Lily had somehow captured perfectly. The other had short hair and was smiling. Between them, on the table, was something that might have been a coffee mug, or might have been a small sun. It was hard to tell. Ellie looked at the drawing for a long time. Long enough that Maya almost said something. Almost said, "She drew it last night," or, "Sorry, it's not very good," but stopped herself, because both of those things would have been deflections, and Ellie didn't seem like someone who needed things deflected. "This is beautiful, Lily," Ellie said, and she said it the way she said everything, directly, without inflation, as a statement of fact. Can I keep it? Lily nodded seriously. Yes, but you have to put it somewhere you can see it. I will, said Ellie. I promise. Maya watched this exchange with something tightening in her chest that she couldn't quite name. Something that was not quite sadness and not quite gratitude, but lived in the space between them. Lily's father had not drawn anything for anyone in 6 years, had not kept anything on a wall or a refrigerator, had not promised to put something somewhere he could see it. He sent a birthday card every year, signed with his name in handwriting that looked like it had been rushed, and that was the extent of his presence in their lives. And here was this woman, this stranger who was not a stranger anymore, not entirely, holding a child's drawing like it was something precious. The conversation that Tuesday was different from the first. It started not in silence, but in the middle of something, as if a thread had been running between them all week, and they were simply picking it up again. Ellie asked about Lily's school, not the way adults ask children about school, with that slightly condescending brightness, but genuinely, curiously, leaning forward just slightly in her chair and listening to Lily's answer, with the same attention she gave to everything. Lily talked about a project she was doing on ocean animals, about a classmate named Diego who could hold his breath underwater for 45 seconds, which was 45 seconds longer than anyone else in the class. About how her teacher, Miss Rivera, had a cat named Peaches who came to school sometimes and sat on the desk during circle time. Ellie listened to all of it, and when Lily ran out of things to say and turned back to her coloring book, Ellie looked at Maya and said, "She's going to change the world someday." Maya laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her. "God, I hope so." "You don't hope so," Ellie said, smiling. "You know so. You can see it." Maya looked at her daughter, at the small body bent over the coloring book, the tongue poking out slightly in concentration, the way she held the crayon like it was an instrument, and felt something shift in her chest. Not a new feeling, an old one she carried with her constantly, the fierce and terrifying love that had arrived the day Lily was born and had not left for a single second since. But hearing someone else see it, someone who was not her mother or her sister or a therapist, hearing someone else say it out loud, casually, as if it were obvious, made it feel less like a weight she carried alone. "Thank you," Maya said, and she meant it for more than just the words. Ellie nodded once, and did not look away. They talked about other things. Ellie said she worked as a freelance graphic designer, that before the accident she had worked at an agency downtown, and after, she had started working from home, and somewhere along the way she had discovered that she preferred it. Not out of fear, out of a quiet realization that the life she wanted did not require an office, did not require commuting, did not require performing wholeness for an audience. "I just need a laptop and a good chair," she said, "and coffee. Mostly coffee." Maya told her about the nonprofit, about the grant applications she wrote at night after Lily was asleep. Hunched over the kitchen table with a laptop that was 2 years past its useful life and a cup of tea that went cold before she finished it. About the way the work felt important in the abstract. They were helping families navigate the foster care system, helping kids find stability, but sometimes felt invisible in the concrete, in the day-to-day, when the funding was uncertain, and the bureaucracy was relentless, and the faces of the children they were trying to help were not in the same room. "Does it get hard?" Ellie asked. "Doing work that matters but feeling like no one sees it?" Maya considered the question. It was not a casual question. It was the kind of question that someone asks when they already know the answer, when they have lived it themselves. "Every day," Maya said. "But I can't stop. If I stop, the kids don't get helped." Ellie looked at her for a long moment. And then she said something that Maya would think about for days afterward. "You know, most people would have stopped a long time ago. The fact that you haven't, that says more about you than any grant application ever could." Maya didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. She just held Ellie's gaze for 1 second longer than she meant to, and then looked down at her mac and cheese, which had gone cold, and smiled at nothing in particular. That night, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet in the way it always was, not peaceful quiet, but hollow quiet, the quiet of a space that was too big for 2 people but all they had, Maya sat on the couch with her laptop and tried to work on a grant proposal. The words wouldn't come. She kept stopping, staring at the screen, and then closing her eyes and seeing the corner table and the rain on the window, and the way Ellie had held Lily's drawing. She picked up her phone and opened the browser and typed the title of the book Ellie had been reading. She had noticed it, the cover, a worn paperback with a cracked spine, the title barely visible. She found it online. It was a novel about a woman rebuilding her life after losing everything she thought defined her. Maya bought it. It would arrive in 2 days. She set the phone down and looked at the dark window of the apartment, at the reflection of the living room lamp in the glass, and thought, I don't know what this is. And then, quieter. I don't think I need to know yet. If this story is touching your heart, follow along. Comment where you're listening from and what you're feeling right now. The book arrived on a Thursday. Maya put it on the nightstand and didn't open it until Sunday night. When Lily was asleep and the rain had come back, and the apartment was doing that thing it did in October, contracting around her like a shell, and she needed something to crawl into. She read for 2 hours straight, did not stop when her tea went cold, did not stop when her eyes burned. The novel was about a woman named Catherine, who had lost her husband in an accident, and had spent 3 years trying to live inside the shape of the life they had built together, the house, the routines, the identity of wife, until she realized one morning that the shape no longer fit, that she had been wearing it like a coat that was 2 sizes too small, and that taking it off was not betrayal, it was survival. Maya closed the book at midnight with her heart beating faster than it should have been, and she lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thought about Ellie saying she had been rereading it. Thought about Ellie saying she always stopped at the same chapter. Thought about the way Ellie had looked at her sometimes, across the corner table, with a kind of seeing that felt different from anything Maya had experienced before, like being recognized, like being found. On Tuesday, she brought the book with her to the food hall. Ellie was already there. Of course she was. Maya had started to think of Ellie at the corner table as a fixed point, the way you think of a landmark, something that was always there, that you could orient yourself by. The rain was lighter today, just a mist that clung to everything without committing to being a storm, and the light coming through the window was softer, almost amber, and it caught the side of Ellie's face in a way that made Maya stop walking for a half-second before she remembered where she was. Lily saw Ellie and practically ran to the table. Ellie, did you put my drawing up? Ellie smiled. I did, right above my desk, first thing I see every morning. Lily beamed, the full-body beam of a child who has been told that something she made matters, and sat down and pulled out her coloring book, already absorbed in the next project before Maya had even set the tray down. Maya sat, and without a word, she placed the book on the table between them. The same paperback, the same cracked spine, though hers was newer, the pages not yet soft from being held the way Ellie's were. Ellie looked at it, looked at Maya, and something passed between them that was not surprise and not embarrassment, but something quieter, a mutual acknowledgement that this mattered, that it meant something that Maya had gone looking for this book, and found it, and read it, and brought it here. What did you think? Ellie asked. Maya thought about the question, about Catherine in the novel, taking off the too small coat, about the way the book had made her cry in the dark on a Sunday night, not from sadness, but from something that felt closer to relief. The relief of seeing something true written down, the relief of knowing she was not the only one who had felt this way. I think, Maya said slowly, that I understand why you keep rereading it. Ellie held her gaze and nodded. They didn't say anything else about the book. They didn't need to. The fact that it was there, between them on the table, was enough. It was a door that had been opened, and neither of them needed to walk through it yet. They just needed to know it was there. It was Lily who asked the question that Maya had been afraid to ask. Afraid not because it was inappropriate, but because she didn't know how to ask it without it sounding like pity, and pity was the last thing Ellie needed from her. They were halfway through their mac and cheese, Lily coloring, Ellie sketching something on a napkin with a pen, a quick, fluid drawing of the food hall that was already more detailed and alive than anything Maya could have produced, when Lily looked up and said, with the directness that was her defining quality, Ellie, did you choose your leg? Maya's stomach dropped. She opened her mouth, to apologize, to redirect, to do any of the things adults do when a child accidentally steps on a landmine. but Ellie's hand moved slightly, a small gesture, and Maya stopped. Ellie looked at Lily, not with discomfort, not with the careful, rehearsed patience that people sometimes used when they were trying not to be hurt by an innocent question. She looked at her the way she looked at everything, directly, honestly, with the same calm attention she brought to her work and her coffee and her books. "No," she said, "I didn't choose to lose my leg. That happened to me. But this one..." She tapped the prosthetic lightly with her fingertips. "This one I chose. I chose to get it. I chose to learn how to walk on it. I chose to keep going." Lily considered this for a moment, then she nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "That's really brave," she said, and went back to coloring. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked at Ellie, and Ellie looked back, and in Ellie's eyes there was something that Maya recognized, not gratitude for the question exactly, but gratitude for the way it had been received. The way Lily had asked it without loading it with meaning, without turning it into something that required an emotional response beyond honesty. Just a question. Just an answer. Just a child seeing someone clearly and saying so. "Kids," Ellie said quietly and smiled. "Kids," Maya agreed. After that Tuesday, the messages started. Not immediately. Not that day. Not even that week. They started the following Monday, when Maya was at work, and Lily was in school, and the day was dragging in the way workdays drag when you are counting the hours until Tuesday, and she found herself picking up her phone and typing, "Lily wants to know if your cat drawing is done yet." The response came in 4 minutes. "Tell Lily the cat is almost done. It's wearing a tiny hat now." Maya laughed, out loud, in the middle of the office, loud enough that her coworker James looked up from his desk with raised eyebrows. She typed back, "She's going to lose her mind. Good. That's the plan." After that, the messages came every day, not constantly, not the breathless, compulsive back and forth of a new crush, though Maya was beginning to understand that what she was feeling might not be so far from that. They came the way rain came in Portland in October, steadily, without drama, present without demanding attention. A photo of Lily's face when she saw the cat drawing with the tiny hat, which Ellie had mailed to their apartment, in an envelope addressed to Miss Lily Chen. A link to a song Ellie thought Maya would like, sent at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday with no comment, just the link. A "How was your day?" at 9 p.m. on a Thursday, and a response 20 minutes later that said more than it should have. It was a thread, a thin, quiet thread connecting them between Tuesdays. And Maya did not pull on it or examine it too closely. She just let it be there, the way you let a thread be there when you find it in your hands, carefully, without gripping, with the awareness that it is connected to something you can't yet see. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting back. It's choosing to keep going, choosing to let someone see you. Have you ever found someone who made that choice easier? The first time they went somewhere together that was not the food hall, it happened because of an emergency. Or at least that was what Maya told herself afterward, in the quiet hours when she replayed the evening in her mind and tried to understand how the shape of her life had changed so completely in the space of an afternoon. It was a Thursday. Lily had a fever, not a mild one, the kind that made her cheeks flush, and her eyes go glassy and her body go limp in Maya's arms when she carried her from the after-school program to the car. Maya drove home, laid Lily on the couch, took her temperature, 102. 4, and opened the medicine cabinet and found it empty. She had forgotten to replace the children's Tylenol after the last time Lily had been sick, 3 weeks ago, and the drugstore 2 blocks away closed at 6 on Thursdays, and it was already 5:48. She picked up her phone and called her sister. No answer. Called her mother. Voicemail. She stared at the screen for a moment, Lily whimpering on the couch behind her, the clock ticking, and then, without fully deciding to, opened her messages and typed to Ellie, "Do you have children's Tylenol? Lily has a fever and I'm out." The response came in under a minute. "Yes, give me your address. I'll be there in 15. Ellie arrived in 12. She was wearing a jacket Maya hadn't seen before. A dark blue one, soft-looking, zipped up against the October cold, and she was carrying not just the Tylenol, but a small insulated bag from which she produced, with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this before, a container of homemade chicken broth, still warm. "The Tylenol first," she said, handing it to Maya. "The broth when she wakes up, if she's hungry." Maya took the Tylenol, looked at the broth, looked at Ellie, standing in her kitchen doorway with her shoes still on, not presuming to come further in, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not dramatically, not with the sharp intake of breath that stories use to mark a turning point, but quietly, the way ice cracks in early spring. Slowly, inevitably, because the temperature has changed and there is nothing to do about it. "Ellie." "Don't," Ellie said, and smiled. "Just give her the Tylenol. I'll go." "Stay," Maya said. The word came out before she could stop it, before she could think about what it meant, or whether it was too much or too soon or too anything. "Please, just stay for a little while. She's going to want to see you when she wakes up." Ellie looked at her for a long moment, and then she took off her jacket and hung it on the back of the kitchen chair and sat down at the small table by the window. And Maya gave Lily the medicine, and when the girl woke up 40 minutes later, flushed and disoriented, the first thing she said was, "Is Ellie here?" Maya looked at Ellie, who was sitting at the kitchen table reading one of Lily's picture books, and the crack in her chest widened a little more. "She's here," Maya said. Ellie stayed for 2 hours that night. She sat with Lily on the couch while Maya cleaned up the kitchen, and she read to her. Not one of the children's books from the shelf, but the novel she had brought in her bag, the same one Maya had read, and she read it in a way that made it into something else entirely. Her voice low and steady and warm, the words becoming not a story about loss, but a story about the possibility of what comes after. Lily fell asleep before the first chapter was finished, her head tilted against Ellie's shoulder, her breathing slow and even, the fever already beginning to break. Ellie didn't move, didn't shift or adjust or reach for her phone. She just sat there, in the quiet of Maya's small apartment, with a sleeping child against her side, and Maya stood in the kitchen doorway and watched and felt something she had not felt in a very long time, the sensation of not being alone. Not the absence of loneliness, that was different. That was simply being distracted, being busy, being too tired to notice. This was something else. This was the presence of someone who was simply there, who did not need to fill the silence or justify her existence in the room, who was comfortable enough to just be in the way that only people who have been through something enormous and come out the other side can be. When Lily was fully asleep, Ellie carefully extricated herself from the couch, pulling a blanket over the girl with a gentleness that made Maya's throat tighten. She walked into the kitchen and picked up her jacket from the chair and put it on, and Maya said, "Thank you," and Ellie said, "She's easy to love, Maya." It was not said as a compliment about Lily. Or rather, it was, but it was also said as something else. Something that hung in the air between them like smoke, visible and weightless at the same time. Maya didn't respond. Ellie didn't wait for a response. She smiled. That smile, the one that was becoming as familiar as the corner table, as the sound of the rain, and let herself out. The first time someone saw them together outside the food hall and reacted, really reacted. Not just glanced and looked away, but stopped and stared, and made their discomfort known in the way that discomfort is always made known, through the body, through the eyes, through the small adjustments people make when they see something they don't want to see. It was at a farmer's market in late November. It was a Saturday. Lily was with Maya's sister for the afternoon. A rare arrangement. One that Maya had not engineered and had not planned around, but that had simply happened, and that left her with an afternoon that was entirely, unusually hers. She had texted Ellie. They had agreed to meet at the market on S.E. Hawthorne, which was crowded and loud and smelled like roasted chestnuts and fresh apple cider and the particular damp sweetness of a Pacific Northwest fall. They walked through the stalls together, shoulders occasionally brushing, talking about nothing important. About a design project Ellie was working on, about a grant Maya was writing, about whether the apple cider vendor was better than the one on Division Street. And Maya felt, for the first time in months, something that she could only describe as ease. The ease of being with someone who did not require her to be anything other than what she was, who did not need her to be brave or strong or okay, who was simply there, beside her, matching her pace. They were standing at a stall selling handmade candles when Maya noticed the woman. She was standing a few feet away, holding a bag of produce, and she was looking at them. Not glancing. Looking. Her eyes moved from Maya to Ellie, down to Ellie's prosthetic leg, back up to their faces, and then to the space between them. And something in her expression shifted, not into hostility, exactly, but into a kind of rigid disapproval that was somehow worse than hostility, because it was quieter, more contained, more certain of its own righteousness. Maya saw it. The heat rose in her chest the way it always did. Fast, involuntary. A flush of anger that started in her stomach and moved to her throat. She turned slightly, ready to say something, ready to do something. She didn't know what, exactly, but something. And then she felt Ellie's hand, not grabbing her arm or pulling her back, just touching it, fingertips on the inside of Maya's wrist. Light. Brief. A quiet signal that said, "I see it. I see you seeing it. It's okay." Maya looked at Ellie. Ellie's expression had not changed. She was still looking at the candles, still holding her cider, still standing in the November sunlight with the same stillness she brought to everything, but her fingers were still on Maya's wrist, just barely, and Maya understood. "I've seen that look 1,000 times," Ellie said quietly, not turning her head. "It used to make me angry. Now it just makes me tired, and I don't want to be tired today. Today I want to smell candles and drink cider and walk through a market with someone I like being around." Maya swallowed the anger. It didn't disappear. It sat in her chest like a coal, still warm, but it didn't spread. She looked at Ellie's hand on her wrist, at the delicate touch that was already fading, and she nodded. They bought a candle, lavender and cedar, Ellie's choice, and kept walking. That night, alone in her apartment with Lily asleep and the candle burning on the kitchen table, Maya sat on the couch and thought about Ellie's hand on her wrist. About the way it had felt. Not like restraint, not like a leash, but like an anchor. Like someone saying, "You don't have to carry this by yourself." She thought about all the things she had been carrying by herself, the grief of Lily's father leaving, the exhaustion of working full-time and parenting alone, the quiet, persistent fear that she was not enough money, not enough patience, not enough of anything, and the way that fear had calcified over time into something she carried like a second skeleton, invisible but always there, shaping the way she moved through the world. And she thought about Ellie, who had lost her leg and her marriage and 2 years of her life to recovery, and who sat at a corner table on Tuesdays reading a book about rebuilding, and who sent a child a drawing of a cat in a tiny hat through the mail, and who held a sleeping girl against her shoulder without moving, and who touched the inside of Maya's wrist at a farmer's market to say, "I'm here. You don't have to do this alone." Maya closed her eyes. The lavender cedar scent filled the room, and she sat there, in the quiet, and felt something she had not felt in years, the beginning of hope. Not the loud, declarative hope of someone who has solved their problems. The quiet hope of someone who has realized that the problems do not have to be solved alone. Resilience isn't about never feeling the weight. It's about finding someone who helps you carry it without asking you to pretend it isn't there. 3 months after the first Tuesday at the corner table, Maya's mother called on a Wednesday evening and said she wanted to come visit. Not for a holiday, not for a specific occasion. She just wanted to see Lily. Wanted to see Maya. Wanted to sit in the small apartment on SE 34th Street and drink tea and watch her granddaughter color and make sure her daughter was okay. Maya said yes. And then, after she hung up the phone, she sat on the couch for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to tell her mother about Ellie. Not because she was ashamed, she wasn't. She had known since she was 19 that she was attracted to women, had told her sister first, then her mother, then the rest of the world in the incremental, unglamorous way that most people come out. Quietly, one person at a time, without a single dramatic moment. Her mother had cried, not from disappointment, but from something closer to relief. As if Maya's honesty had lifted a weight from both of them. That had been 12 years ago. It was old news. What was new, what Maya was still trying to understand herself, was what Ellie meant. Not just what she was, what she meant. To Maya. To Lily. To the shape of their life, which had been small and tight and survivable for years, but which was beginning, in ways Maya could feel but couldn't yet articulate, to open. She didn't tell her mother anything on the phone. She waited. Her mother, Barbara, arrived on a Friday afternoon. She was 63, small and sharp-eyed, with the kind of energy that made rooms feel warmer simply by her presence. She drove up from Sacramento in her Honda Civic with a cooler full of food, tamales, because Maya's grandmother's tamales were the only thing in the world that could make Maya cry from pure memory, and an overnight bag and the particular expression she wore when she was trying very hard not to show how worried she was about her daughter. Lily ran to her grandmother the moment Barbara walked through the door, and Barbara caught her and held her and said, "Let me look at you. Let me look at you," the way grandmothers do, as if the child might have changed fundamentally since the last time they saw each other, and they need to verify. Maya watched them from the kitchen doorway, her mother and her daughter. 2 generations of the same stubbornness, the same dark eyes, the same way of tilting their heads when they were listening, and felt the ache that always came when she saw her family together, the ache of wanting more of it, of wishing it were closer, more constant, less dependent on long drives and rare weekends. Barbara stayed through Monday. On Sunday afternoon, when Lily was napping and the apartment was quiet, Maya made tea and sat at the kitchen table across from her mother and said, "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet." Barbara looked at her, not with surprise. Barbara rarely looked surprised at anything, but with a kind of attentive stillness, the way a bird goes quiet when it hears something it needs to listen to. "Okay," she said. "Tell me about her." Maya told her, about the food hall, about the corner table, about Ellie's short dark hair and her book and her prosthetic leg and the way she smiled, about the drawing Lily had made, about the chicken broth and the Tylenol, and the night Ellie had read to Lily on the couch, about the farmer's market and the candle and the hand on Maya's wrist, about the messages and the thread and the way Maya felt, for the first time in years, like she was not drowning. Barbara listened to all of it without interrupting. When Maya finished, Barbara was quiet for a long moment. She wrapped both hands around her tea, the way Ellie held her coffee, Maya thought, and then felt something catch in her throat at the similarity and looked out the kitchen window at the gray Portland sky. "She sounds good," Barbara said finally. "She is good," Maya said. "I mean good for you." Barbara looked at her daughter. "I mean good for Lily. I mean—" She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was slightly rougher than it had been. "I've watched you carry everything by yourself for 6 years, Mija, and I've felt helpless, because I'm 3 hours away and I can't fix it. So if there's someone who's helping you carry it, if there's someone who makes you feel less alone, then yes, I want to meet her." Maya nodded. Her eyes were burning. She didn't cry. She never cried in front of her mother if she could help it, old habit, old armor. But her mother saw it anyway, the way mothers always do, and reached across the table and squeezed her hand. On Tuesday, they went to the food hall. Maya, Barbara, and Lily, with the tray and the mac and cheese and the apple cider. And they walked to the corner table where Ellie was already sitting, book open, coffee steaming, the same stillness she always brought to that corner. And Maya watched her mother's face as they approached. Barbara looked at Ellie, looked at the prosthetic leg, the way everyone did, a quick glance, involuntary, human, and then looked back up at Ellie's face, at her calm brown eyes, and her quiet smile, and something in Barbara's expression settled, not into judgment, into assessment. The way a mother assesses someone who is near her child, not with suspicion, but with the serious, careful attention of someone who is deciding whether this person can be trusted. Ellie stood, not all the way, not dramatically, just a slight rise, enough to extend her hand, and said, "Mrs. Chen, it's really good to meet you." Barbara took her hand, held it for a moment longer than a standard handshake, and said, "Eleanor, Maya's told me about you, a beat." Ellie glanced at Maya, who felt her ears go red. "Has she?" Ellie said. "Sit down," Barbara said gently, and it was not clear whether she was telling Ellie to sit or telling herself. "Let's eat. Lily, show your abuela your new drawings." Lily, who had been vibrating with the desire to show her grandmother the cat drawing that Ellie had sent back, redrawn this time with the cat in a tiny hat and tiny boots, and a small sign that said, "I live here now," pulled Barbara into the chair and spread the paper on the table like a treasure map. Barbara looked at the drawing, looked at Ellie, and smiled. A real smile, warm and open. The smile she gave to people she had decided were worth knowing. "Not bad," she said to Ellie. "Not bad at all." Ellie laughed. And for the next hour, in the corner of the Maple Court Food Hall on a Tuesday in late November, 3 generations of the Chen family and one woman who was becoming part of that family sat at a table that was technically meant for 2 and talked about tamales and ocean animals and the best way to draw a cat in a hat. And the rain came down outside the window and the string lights buzzed overhead, and nobody mentioned that the table was too small, because it wasn't. Not anymore. The moment that broke Maya open, the moment she would carry with her for the rest of her life, the moment she would think about on hard days, on lonely days, on days when the world felt too heavy and too indifferent, came 2 weeks later, on a Saturday evening, in Maya's apartment. Lily was in bed. Barbara had gone back to Sacramento. The apartment was quiet in the way it used to be quiet, hollow, echoing. But something had changed. The lavender cedar candle was burning on the kitchen table. Lily's drawings were taped to the refrigerator, next to a new one that Ellie had made, a small detailed illustration of the corner table in the food hall, with 3 chairs around it, and the rain visible through the window behind them. And in the center of the table, a tiny drawn coffee mug with steam rising from it. Ellie was on the couch. Maya was beside her. They were not touching. There was a few inches of space between them, the way there always was. The careful distance of 2 people who were aware of the space between them, and choosing consciously not to close it until they were sure. They had been talking about nothing. About a movie they had both seen years ago and neither remembered clearly. About whether the rain would stop before December. About the way Lily had started drawing the corner table in her own coloring book, in her own crayon, with her own imperfect lines. 3 stick figures at a table, one tall, one shorter, one very small, and above them, in careful crayon letters that were not yet perfectly formed, F.A.M. Maya had shown Ellie the drawing that morning, had watched Ellie's face as she looked at it, watched the way Ellie's expression didn't change exactly, but deepened, the way water deepens when it gets still. "Fam," Ellie had said. She started to write family. She ran out of room, Maya had said. She was going to finish it on the next line. Now, on the couch, in the quiet of the evening, Ellie turned to Maya and said something that Maya had not expected, had not been bracing for, had not prepared herself to hear, because it came from a place so simple and so honest that it didn't need preparation. "I want you to know something," Ellie said. Maya looked at her. The candlelight was warm on Ellie's face, catching the line of her jaw, the slight curve of her smile. Before this, I had a life," Ellie said. "It was a quiet life. It was enough. I had my work, my books, my Tuesday mornings at the food hall. I had built it carefully, piece by piece, after everything fell apart, and it was okay. It was survivable. I was okay." She paused. Not from emotion. Ellie was not someone who paused from emotion. She paused the way she did everything, deliberately, giving the words room to exist before the next ones came. "But survivable isn't the same thing as living," she said, "and I didn't know the difference until you sat down at my table and asked if you could share it. And I didn't know, I really didn't know, that I had been waiting for someone to ask." Maya didn't speak. She couldn't. The words were there. She could feel them, pressing against the inside of her chest like something trying to get out. But they wouldn't come, because what she was feeling was too big and too quiet at the same time, too real to be captured in a sentence, too important to risk getting wrong. So instead, she did the only thing that felt right. She closed the distance between them, those few careful inches, and took Ellie's hand, not quickly, not impulsively, slowly, deliberately, the way Ellie did everything, with the full awareness of what it meant. She took Ellie's hand and held it, and Ellie's fingers closed around hers, and they sat there in the quiet of the apartment with the candle burning, and the rain on the window, and Lily sleeping down the hall. And Maya said, "I didn't know I was waiting either." They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, not needing to. The rain filled the silence, and the candle flickered, and somewhere in the small apartment, a clock ticked, and the world outside went on being the world. Complicated and difficult and indifferent to the small, enormous thing that was happening in this room. But in this room, at this moment, two women who had each been broken by different kinds of loss sat together on a couch and held hands and felt, for the first time in a long time, like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The corner table at the Maple Court Food Hall is still there. It's still small, a two-top, technically, the kind of table meant for one or two at most. On Tuesdays at 12:47, if you walk past it, you'll see 3 chairs pulled up to it now, one for Maya, one for Ellie, one for Lily, who is 6.5 and draws pictures of the food hall that she tapes to the refrigerator at home, and who calls Ellie by name the way she calls everyone she loves by name. Simply, without ceremony, because that is how love works when it has not yet learned to be complicated. The table is too small for 3, the chairs crowd each other, someone's elbow always bumps someone else's. The mac and cheese goes cold sometimes because they are too busy talking to eat it, or because Lily is showing Ellie a drawing, or because Maya is laughing at something Ellie said and has forgotten that she is holding a fork. None of them have ever suggested moving to a bigger table, because the corner table is where it started. The corner table is where a woman with a book and a coffee sat alone and was lonely without knowing she was lonely, where a woman with a tray and a daughter stood in the middle of a crowded room and didn't know where to go, where a little girl drew a picture of 2 women at a table and called it home before anyone had used that word. It is where someone asked, "Can I share this table with you?" And someone answered, "The table's been lonely," and everything began. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you feel something you needed to feel, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the greatest act of love is not something you do for yourself. It's showing someone else that they are not alone. Follow along. Tell us where you are and what you're feeling. We want to know.